Now then, in this one we're going to look at DFDs, data flow diagrams. We're still looking at the analysis stage of the SDLC, although DFDs can be a part of the design stage as well. But when we're looking at them in this video, we're thinking about the analysis stage. During analysis, the analyst will work closely with the client, and they might come up with something like this. This is a DFD, a data flow diagram. And at the analysis stage, these represent how the current, existing, old, whatever you want to call it, how that system works. Now just pause this video at this point and watch these two YouTube videos if you can. Particularly the second one, I think, explains data flow diagrams really well. Now if you watched those YouTube videos, you'll have seen that there are two conventions, or two standards if you like, for showing data flow diagrams. And it's not too important which one you use for A-level computing, but let's have a look at the different symbols that are used now. So to show a process, we'd use a rounded rectangle like that one, and we draw a couple of lines in it like that at the top. We put a number in the top left hand corner, and then in the rest of that top part we would put whereabouts physically does this process take place. So if you were designing a quiz system for a college, for instance, we'd put college up there. Then in the main part of the rectangle we'd write the name of the process, so physics revision quiz, for example. And the next thing to represent in a DFD is an external entity. So in one convention we might use an ellipse like this, and we'd put a letter and the name of the external entity. And then in another convention we'd use a square with the same information. Next thing to show would be a data flow, and for that we'd just use a standard arrow. So this is going to show the movement of data around a system between something like a process and an external entity. And on the arrow we'd write the data that is being sent. Then we'd have a data store, which is a long rectangle divided up into two, and in the first part we have a letter and a number, and the second part we have the data that is stored somewhere. So this will be some data that is saved somewhere or stored somewhere. So a D would mean that the data stored is digital. If we ever to see an M, that means it will be stored manually, maybe on paper in a filing cabinet, and that could be quite likely in an existing system, particularly if you are trying to turn a manual system into an automated ICT system. And then you might have a T, which is for transient data, for example data being sent in an email, although we hope that would never happen. So that's what the letter is for at the beginning of a data store. Now one reason that people like to use DFDs is that once you've drawn out a DFD at what is called its highest level, you can then break it down into more detail into lower level DFDs. So you might have many DFDs portraying a system. For the computing project in the second year of the A-level, it's likely that you'll only need to do a high level data flow diagram, such as the example here for a quiz system. And you'll notice that in this there are no data stores. There are only the process in the middle, there are external entities on the outside, and then the data flows going out from the external entities and also towards the external entities. Another thing you might notice is that the two different external entities in this diagram are mentioned several times, 4 times each, in fact, just to make the diagram clear and for sake of clarity. In the F451 exam, where might DFDs come up? Well, there may not be a question just on data flow diagrams. What's more likely is that you might be expected to mention them or explain how they work as part of a question that asks about different analysis techniques, methods or diagrams. But it might not just be the analysis stage that you're asked about data flow diagrams. I mentioned before that they could also be part of the design stage. So you might get asked about them in an exam as part of a design question. And we'll look at data flow diagrams with regards to design in a later video. You might also be asked to define a DFD. So here's some good points included in your definition of a data flow diagram. Is something that will show how information is processed in a system. It can be broken down into multiple levels. Will show internal and external parts of a system. And then you maybe have to explain the 4 different symbols, just like that there. Thanks for watching.